Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here as always with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's episode in the swells of summer heat here in Houston. And it is hot and sunny and beautiful, and I love it. And we're going to talk about today how to optimize your OMAD strategy. The study that we're going to be getting into out of the Journal of Nutrition and Metabolism, just from earlier this year in 2025, is the effects of initiating a 24-hour fast with a low versus high carbohydrate shake on glycemic blood sugar control in older adults, a randomized crossover study. Really freaking cool study about getting into ketosis, blood sugar, GLP. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how to optimize your results during the summertime. This is one of the easiest levers that we can pull. We're going to take a little different stance on it because this study was really, really eye-opening, and a couple of small things that we can do to make large improvements. So excited for that conversation today, Tommy. I want to give a shout out. If you're new to the podcast, welcome in. And we're going to highlight one of the new 5-star reviews that we just got on June 11th. They are our favorite kind.
Oh, yeah.
By the good graces of the Lord above, we have lots of them. I love to see the the feedback from y'all, from the listeners. So if you are new, which this person is, Fun Party Guest said, on June 11th, I came for a simple meal plan. I stayed because now
you didn't get one.
No, you didn't get one. I stayed because now I can explain insulin resistance at dinner parties. Every episode has me saying, wait, that's what carbs do? Followed by an identity crisis in the bread aisle. I've laughed, I've cried, I've Googled what gluconeogenesis means 3 separate times. Yeah, me too.
Right.
If you want to learn why your afternoon slump might be less about laziness and more about your mitochondria being salty at you, listen now. 5 stars.
Awesome.
And 1 reluctantly retired Pop-Tart. And the title of this is, which I love, is I'm questioning my relationship with kale now. As you should, Fun Party Guest.
That's hilarious. Great review.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So if you're new and you came for a meal plan and you stayed for the My Good Jokes and Tommy's Good Looks, then you are in the right place. Head back to episode 0, episode 1. Give it a listen. That'll give you more insight into our fasting journey, how fasting transformed our lives, and why ultimately we do what we do week in and week out with our upcoming challenges, with our coaching, with our resources, with the website, and obviously putting out a podcast week over week, year over year now.
Heck yeah.
4 million downloads. Grateful for each and every one of you. If you're a long-term listener, thank you so much for continuing to be on this journey with us. Thank you so much for spreading the word, your likes, your shares, your rates, your reviews. We truly do appreciate that, and that's what ultimately keeps us going. These reviews, the emails we get, the transformations we get to see, ultimately that's why we do what we do, because we know that the state of the union, it's ugly out there when it comes to chronic health crises. And we ultimately want to give you a strategy and a simple fasting for life plan that can allow you to take actionable things now, starting now, right after this episode, put them into your day-to-day life, put them into your decision tree, put them into your food choices, and ultimately adopt a lifestyle that gets you the weight, removes the weight once and for all, puts you on a path of health, wellness, and longevity for the long term, Tommy. So thank you again. Fun Party Guest. The best way to cook kale is to saute it and dump it in the trash. Now, one of our coaches, shout out to Kieran, she loves kale. My wife loves kale. So that's a little peek behind the curtain.
Mine does too. Yep.
A little peek behind the curtain.
I don't need it.
Very nutrient dense, but tastes like grass. So anyway, moving on. Tommy, let's get into this study. The effects of initiating a 24-hour fast, so OMAD, with a low versus high carbohydrate shake on glycemic control. So before we unpack the study and talk about some of the really cool findings, our first resource that we ever created to adopt the fasting lifestyle was called the Fast Start Guide. Right? And this had you choose your own adventure. What meal do you want to eat every single day to stay consistent with your fasting efforts? One meal a day. 16-8, 18-6. People start there doing keto, doing intermittent fasting. That's part of my story. Got me some short-term results. Stopped working. Gave it a few months. Went back to it. It worked a little bit. Stopped working. There was a lot of difficulty sticking with that plan. So we found that OMAD was like a real momentum generating skill of a fasting lifestyle that we found that was really a plateau breaker and a momentum gainer for so many folks.
Yeah.
So one meal a day.
Yeah.
But a couple of levers and decisions around that meal, we like to call it nutrition opportunities or your eating window where you're eating. We don't like to say window, because that can lead to the whole buffet, open window grazing, overconsumption, all of those different things. But one meal a day is a really powerful tool, and it should be in your skill set when you have a long-term fasting lifestyle.
Yeah, it should be a tool that you can use when you need it. You can rely on it. The simplification, the simplifier, I think, especially like you can take OMAD with you on vacation or on a special occasion, things like that, when there might be more opportunities than you're used to. And you just go, oh man, I don't know how I'm going to navigate all these food choices or more indulgent foods that I'm used to, or maybe more carbohydrate rich kind of foods. It can be a really, really good simplifier to be able to lean on OMAD, even if it's temporarily, as a really good fasting tool.
So let's unpack the study, and then let's talk about some of the really cool things that were found with the simple lever of what do you eat? What is your last meal, so to speak? What's your last meal before you start your next fast?
Yeah, that's a good question too, because a lot of times, think back to like the beginning of when you started fasting. You might not put that much thought into that. You might be changing some old habits that haven't been serving you very well, but you kind of want to just, turn over a new leaf, if you will, at that point. But there may be some habits that you have of having some meals that are more indulgent or more carbohydrate rich, or maybe they're just like not really aligned with your long-term goals. But at the same time, you're kind of looking at it like, well, I'm about to go into a longer fast now. So maybe I have an opportunity. Maybe I need some more calories to sustain myself. Maybe I'm about to earn it. So there could be some of that mentality too. Not like you're deliberately trying to overdo it necessarily, but like, hey, I'm about to go on a longer fast. Like I can afford some, a little bit of a bigger plate, or maybe some more calories or more indulgence here,
foods,
maybe
yeah.
potentially. That can happen. I'm not saying that's ever happened to me, of course, but it's possible. So if you think about what is the composition of that meal, I would say that before reading this study, I definitely put it as an important factor, but not nearly as important as was revealed by some of the results of this study.
Right.
The difference between the meal composition here and what it's actually doing during that 24-hour fast is far beyond like what I would have predicted just intuitively. I could tell you that for myself, my results perfectly match up with what was found in the study, but I wouldn't have extrapolated that from N=1 for myself to just like anybody going into an OMAD, because I know my level of insulin resistance that I had coming into fasting. But this is a really good representation, roughly around 50-year-olds who are overweight but not obese, so BMI of 27 or greater, and then with an average kind of sedentary lifestyle, right?
Yeah. So you just said something there, because N=1, right? This is something that we practice and preach and teach and coach, and we see this time and time again. So it's probably N equals probably hundreds at this point.
Yeah.
Is the meal decisions you make before you start your next fast greatly impact the ability for you to stay consistent and clean on that next fast. So
100%.
if you're doing dinner OMAD and you have an indulgent meal, you have a glass of wine, you have a little dessert, you have a higher carb rate meal, it's kind of a longer window.
Yeah.
That's going to affect your sleep. You're going to wake up. Your blood sugar management the next day is going to be up to 35% more volatile. Your cravings are going to be higher.
Yeah.
Your willpower is going to be lower. So we always say, if you're going to start a longer fast, or if you're trying to get more consistency with fasting, the first lever you pull before you fast is really the most important one. And we always talk about intentionality in your food choices, how to build your plate.
Yeah.
Prioritize protein, because when you get farther into the fasting lifestyle, you then start thinking about like keto mojo and ketosis and fat burning, not the number on the scale, body composition.
Yeah, DEXA scan.
So we're looking at this in the moment of, okay, what is the worst thing you can do is do the all-you-can-eat buffet feasting window, right? With, processed, refined, convenient, carb-heavy, alcohol foods or decisions in that window, and then expect your next fast to be that much easier. It's not. It's going to be more difficult.
And less effective.
What's up?
It's going to be less effective as well.
Yeah, it's going to stack the deck against you. So let's unpack the study and kind of hit a couple of the really key points that we saw here. And this study was designed to investigate how the meal type, how the type of meal consumed before fasting affects the time it takes for the body to enter a state of ketosis. Ketosis is when the body starts burning fat for energy instead of glucose and carbohydrates. So this group was older, sedentary, and overweight adults, like you said, who are at risk for those chronic lifestyle diseases that I mentioned earlier. These people were not overly active. They did less than 150 minutes of activity or exercise every single week. And the reason I love the intention of the study is because this is the group of folks that a lot of us fall into, maybe not in the age, but in the BMI category, which, again, we don't love the BMI. We've done podcast episodes on this. We prefer waist circumference and insulin resistance and HOMA-IR and waist to height ratio and all things that are more indicative of insulin resistance and that underlying cause of those metabolic diseases. But looking at the BMI chart in that overweight category, which we know then leads to a slippery slope of these other things rearing their head later on down the line in terms of year over year, decade over decade. We want to avoid that metabolic issue. If you have a metabolic issue, then we want to give you a tool that you can help you reverse it and not just manage it like the wait and see method with managing diabetes, which is how it's currently managed. So when we look at the study design, both groups did both, both conditions. So each group started a fast with either a high carb, low fat shake or a low carb, high fat shake. And each participant acted as their own control, which helps reduce the variability, which I thought was cool. So one group started with the high carb, low fat, 7-day washout, and then they did the opposite. They did the low carb, high fat, and vice versa, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So when you actually go through that, so they took the same participants and they had them go through both. So that's an important thing because then you're eliminating the differences between the subjects that might contribute to those N=1, those like, hey, my body reacts differently than your body, right? So then everybody got to participate on both sides, which is really cool. And then also just the fact that basically their fasting timer started immediately after having this shake. Now, and this shake was approximately 25% of their caloric needs. It was right around 600 calories. And then both sides of the either one, the higher fat or the higher carbohydrate, they both had approximately the same number of grams of protein, about 50 grams of protein, somewhere in there, plus or minus a few. And so this is I really like this because it's very reproducible. We can take this and we can use it in our own fasting efforts. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. in the
Mhm.
conversation. But if you just take this one variable and it's 25% of your calories, I would have looked at this like, hey, this is gonna have an effect on the next fast. It's gonna affect blood sugar for sure. It's gonna affect ketones, but I would have thought maybe there would have been like a little bit of a lag going from the higher carb group to the higher fat group, as far as how long does it take for blood sugar to normalize, and then what about ketones? I would have expected those ketones might still peak out around the same level, and that they just maybe just trailed behind a few hours. But the results are more dramatic than that. Whereas you don't actually have all of the data within this study. I imagine this group will probably put out some more data based on this study, or maybe do some follow-up studies based on this, because of the kind of the inroads that they made with this particular study.
Yep.
I would love to see how long it would take for those results to kind of catch up. But I would have just predicted maybe a few hours, but it's definitely going to be longer than that based on these results. It might be 12 hours or maybe even more to kind of catch those curves up for being in the high carb group.
So let me go 30,000 foot here just to set the stage before we get into some of the hormonal changes that were actually observed.
Okay.
The idea here is the implications for health. That's why we fast. That's why we want a fasting lifestyle, right? We ultimately start a diet to lose weight, to ultimately change a lab marker, prevent a disease, manage a disease, reverse whatever that category is. But that's the big picture. Is we want to improve the metabolic health through fasting. We need to consider the composition of the pre-fast meals. And this is something that we teach on, like we mentioned. And the study concluded that the composition of the meal before fasting optimizes the metabolic benefits. We're going to get to those hormonal changes in just a second, right? And to your point, I think they're going to continue down this road because they actually say it's encouraged to explore the long-term effects of these dietary strategies in conjunction with intermittent fasting, right? So if we're looking at it, what's the optimum, what good, better, best? Right? Good is eating a meal, setting your timer, and then sticking to that timer, and maybe struggling through with some hunger and got some moments of, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? Or am I ever going to make it to the next window? Better would be intentional food choices, having a plan for proper sleep, good hydration that following day, and you have minimal of those effects. And we'll talk about the getting into ketosis faster, getting into fat burning faster. To your point, the lag time and the difference between these small changes in these shakes was mind-blowing to me. And then the best scenario is to make this intentional decision, which makes the next day the easiest possible fast, which allows for consistency and repeatability and sustainability and long-term improvement.
Absolutely.
So the idea here is we want to see what happens to insulin, what happens to blood sugar, what happens to ketone production, because when your body switches through fat burning, from sugar, glucose, carbohydrate burning into fat burning mode, getting into nutritional ketosis, which is 0.5 to about 1.5, that's where we see the ideal fat burning take place, which means the scale is going to reward you with your consistent efforts. So the changes
which is motivating,
yes.
which then connects the next link to the next fast, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, 100%. So with that stage being set, let's talk directly about insulin. Tommy, when do you want to share the macro? Do you want to share the macro breakdown before we get into this?
Yeah, I think it would be a good time. So the higher fat being about 60% of the calories coming from fat versus 60% coming from carbohydrates in the higher carb shake, and then both of them were about 30% protein, and then you can flip the carbohydrates between it was like around 4% in one group versus about somewhere in like the 5 to 10% range of fat within the high carb shake, and then about 5 to 10% carbohydrates within the higher fat group, if that made sense.
Yeah, so low carb, high fat is 60% fat, 30% protein. And then high carb, low fat is 57%. So let's call it 60% carb and 13 or 14% fat, 30% protein. So protein stays the same. The fat and the carbohydrates flip.
Okay.
let's talk immediate changes, right? After consuming the pre-fast shake, or we can call it a pre-fast meal because you can do this with food too.
Mm-hmm.
Insulin levels dropped by 42% in the low carb, high fat shake within 1 hour. Why does that matter? Well, because that shows us that the blood sugar never really raised, and if it did, insulin was effective in using that sugar, that carbohydrate for energy. So lower insulin means the body is less focused on the sugar, which means it was focused more on fat burning. So in the drop in insulin is effective in getting you into ketosis quicker, because high insulin means that you're not getting into ketosis and allowing your body to switch from sugar burner to fat burner.
Right. When insulin's high, you're blocking the fat burning process. That's what I heard there.
Yep. Let's talk about glucagon.
Okay.
Glucagon works in opposition of insulin by encouraging the release of energy stored as fat. So this is like the signal in your body, the hormone that says, hey, burn fat, burn fat, burn fat, burn fat. This was 24% higher after the low carb, high fat shake compared to the high carb shake.
Wow.
We'll get to ketones in a minute and blood sugar in the area under the curve.
But your body's responding with glucagon based on blood sugar being actually regulated, calories coming in, but then blood sugar not spiking. And so that's a really great physiological place to be, that doesn't just happen based on calories coming in. It's specifically the macronutrient proportions and balance here.
Yep. So let's talk about the incretin. Why can't I say that word? Hormones. You know them as GLP-1. And some of you might know GIP. You've been looking at these options that are out there now for weight loss, right? GLPs, the Ozempics, the Wegovy's. It's all over the place right now in the news.
Mm-hmm.
Love it or hate it, wherever you reside on the spectrum, GLP-1s are going to the main mechanism is to slow down gut motility and reduce hunger so you don't consume as much food.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important also to highlight the fact that they were so appealing because this is a normal physiological process. It's a normal hormonal response that you have within your body, and it's basically it's attempting to pharmacologically put your foot on the gas for an important part of the biochemical reactions that are happening as part of the fat burning process and overall healthy weight management, as well as some other metabolic processes.
Yep.
There becomes trouble when you're just focused on one chemical reaction, one set of
one mechanism,
right? And that always can become a problem, obviously. But if we can find the ways to accelerate and maximize that process within our body physiologically and naturally, we're going to be getting basically the best of that situation that we can do without trying or needing to intervene pharmacologically, if that makes sense.
Yep. So what did GLP-1s? These are those GLP products, right? All the different versions that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
They are GLP agonists, right? So they're going to be released to reduce appetite as the main driver.
Mm-hmm.
With a high-fat, low-carb meal, about 500 calories, 6% fat, 30% protein. We always talk about protein pacing. Build your plate first with protein, prioritize protein, and then healthy fats, right?
Right.
The GLP increased by 27% and the GIP by 34.5%.
Wow. And those are working together in conjunction with each other.
And these regulate how the body handles sugar and fat. So GLP-1 slow down digestion, reduce hunger, which can support further fat burning. While GIP stimulates that boost or that extra burn or that fire behind your metabolism.
Mm. Wow.
So, Tommy, let's talk initially after. When we look at glucose levels, at the 15-minute to 2.25 hour mark, so 15 minutes to 2 hours and 15 minutes later, the high-carb, low-fat group, the glucose levels were higher, which meant that nutritional ketosis was never obtained.
Yeah, that was shocking to me. I mean, I can tell you from my N=1 that as I go through a fast and I'm checking on my keto mojo and seeing what my blood sugar is doing periodically, and seeing what my ketones are doing as well, I can tell you that depending on what I had right before that fast, what time of day it was. I don't know if we mentioned the fact that these were breakfast shakes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember us mentioning that earlier. So they were about 8 a.m. So this 24-hour fast was starting at 8 a.m., which, as we've talked about at length before, is a great time to start a fast. It's not the most popular time, that's for sure, but it is a great time physiologically to start a fast. Because going through that, having your meal as a breakfast meal rather than later on in the day, your body is just much better prepared to actually do what it needs to do with those macronutrients coming in a way that's going to help regulate blood sugar. It's going to lead to a good insulin response rather than an overblown disproportional insulin response. And then it's going to be able to allow you to get back into fat burning much more quickly. Okay. So, but when we take these two meals, are essentially they're two mini meals, basically these shakes, this 500 to 600 calorie shakes here. With the higher fat shake, I mean, it was just a small blip in the blood sugar response. You're talking about going from on average about 90 to about less than 100. So maybe a 10 point or so blood sugar response. Whereas the higher carb shake had roughly about a 30% spike in blood sugar. So going from somewhere around 90 to 95 up to about 130 was the average blood sugar response, which is
normal.
Okay. I would say it's normal, right? But at the same time, it's not optimal for getting into ketosis. It's not optimal for fat burning or for therapeutic level of, hey, I want to balance out some blood work. I want the next 24 hours for good blood sugar and good insulin management. And I want to allow myself to tap into some of those long-term fat stores without my body just having to deal with a bunch of blood sugar over the next 24 hours. And so it took a few hours. It took 3 to 4 hours for that blood sugar to normalize in the higher carbohydrate group, this is why I was saying I would have predicted that maybe this group would have lagged behind. Maybe it would have been 4 hours, maybe a little longer, maybe 6 or 8 hours. But at the same time, I thought that they would, be nearing catching up by the end of this fast, but they weren't. They weren't at all. And I don't know exactly how much more time they're going to need. Hopefully these guys put out a follow-up study here, but I won't be surprised to see if it took 12 or 16 additional hours for that same fast and that same, number of calories coming in to equalize as far as finally getting into similar levels of ketosis. But honestly, 12 or 16 hours later, that higher carb group might still be trailing behind, because then you're still giving that additional time for both groups, and those ketones might be continuing to accumulate and rise in both groups. So you might just be trailing behind the whole fast, which is, again, not what I would have predicted.
So when we talk about ketones, let's think about this. See if I can kind of put a ribbon on what we just went through there. Is time to ketosis.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that your pre-fast meal matters. So time to ketosis means time to fat burning.
Okay.
Right? So how do we get into optimal nutritional ketosis, an ideal fat burning situation, as quickly as possible or efficiently as possible?
Mm-hmm.
So the low carb, high fat group reached nutritional ketosis on average by about 12 hours of the 24-hour fast. So now you've got 12 more hours of fat burning.
Yeah.
In contrast to your point, Tommy, the lag, those starting with the high carb, low fat shake did not achieve nutritional ketosis at any point during the 24 hours.
Yeah, not even at hour 24. They were no closer than they were at hour 12.
So if you're feeling stuck and you're like, OMAD used to work and it's not working, we need to look at your pre-fast meal and your pre-fast nutritional choices.
Yeah, because that's such a great point, because if you think about the level of like slippage that can kind of start to come in, where you start off on, let's say, a new diet or a new fast, a new diet cycle, where you're pumped, you're ready to go, you got some energy, willpower's high, motivation's high, and you're making some good choices. You want to kind of do everything better. Maybe you're more active too. You're dusted off that gym membership or whatever the case may be. You might be doing multiple things right there. But as you kind of get into a groove or a flow, you might start to get a little bored or have some fasting fatigue, maybe. And again, this has definitely happened to me in the past. But this can especially be the case for OMAD, and especially even more so for OMAD dinner, where it's like, okay, well, things are kind of working, and maybe a little bit more food comes in, or maybe the window, maybe a meal becomes a window, maybe it gets a little later, maybe, go ahead.
Let me zoom out. Here's the situation. You've been fasting and the scale's going up 3 to 5 pounds. It goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up.
Yeah. Just kind of bouncing. And then what happens? So then you might start to make a little different food choices, And what can happen there is, all of a sudden, if we took a look at our macronutrient ratios now versus what they looked like 30 days ago or 60 days ago, maybe when you set out to do this, or when things were kind of clicking and moving better, you might notice some appreciable differences here. But it still feels like, well, I'm still doing the fasting, I'm still doing it consistently, I'm still doing OMAD, and maybe it hasn't turned into a window, maybe it is a good, kind of strict meal, 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes at the most, but it's not like wandering off and you're not having trouble closing it, but still it's slowing down, or it doesn't feel like it's working for you. Just the macronutrient ratio here, we can see that higher carb and lower fat is not allowing nutritional ketosis over a 24-hour period. And that's huge, because most fasters aren't consistently going past 24 hours.
And this is what you don't need. You don't need a longer fast. You don't need the 3-day fast starting on a Monday because the wheels fell off on a Friday.
Right. Even though it feels like you do, or it feels like a good idea.
The scale only moves if I do long fast. Well, then we need to look at other things.
Yeah.
Because fasting is tried and true. But this pre-meal. So if we just look at the overview of kind of summarizing everything as we wrap up today, is in some action steps, implications for recommendations, right? So tailoring your pre-fast meals, right? Improved glycemic control, better time to ketosis and fat burning, GLP and GIP working in your favor naturally to balance hunger hormones and increase metabolic function and metabolic health. Just by this simple little decision to make a better intentional decision before you start your next fast. And again, we're not talking about long extended fast. A lot of the fasts that we use are anywhere from 20 to, sometimes we'll do 48 to 72-hour fasts in our challenges in our groups, but it's a challenge. But that's not a tool that we want to use for long-term sustainability. So we want to hit a lot of singles rather than trying to swing for the fences with our fasting mindset.
Yeah, because we're going to need to be making food choices. Food choices are going to always be part of the sustainability equation for long-term success, right? So we don't want to just be avoiding food decisions, because that can feel easier in the moment.
You're just kicking the can down the road.
You're kicking the can, right? And that's exactly what we don't want to be doing. I also want to, highlighting a few action steps here. One would be absolutely take a look at what your OMAD meals have looked like. What do they look like lately? Do you need to do some food swaps? Do you need to take a few of those ingredients, or maybe some of the things that you really like and tend to have during dinner time, but can you optimize them to reduce the number of carbohydrates that are there, so you can increase the healthy fats, so you can make for a better meal composition? And I'll say this too, your meal timing matters. So the later in the day that you're having your OMAD, the more that macronutrient ratio matters. So so if you're having every day and you're one of the kind of the rare fasters that are having consistent breakfast OMADs, your macronutrient proportions are mattering the least. And we can see them in this study. They matter a lot. But it only goes up from there. Lunch is still better physiologically than dinner, but your macronutrient ratios matter. Your food choices matter a lot. And dinner, it's huge, because the more carbohydrates, the larger the meal is, the worse off your sleep is going to be, and then your blood sugar regulation, like you mentioned earlier in the conversation, is going to be terrible.
And you're not going to get into ketosis as effectively or as quickly.
Correct. And so remember, guys, this study here did not look at lunch or dinner. This was breakfast. So the trouble here is that if we go to dinner, which we've polled thousands of people, and almost 95% of fasters
it's the preferred OMAD.
Yeah, dinner, right? Dinner is my go-to meal, and I would say the same thing. But the trouble there is that if you took this same study and did it for dinner, you're probably going to see all of these numbers just shift downward for everybody, which means that across a 24-hour fast, you might not be on average reaching those levels of nutritional ketosis. You might not be seeing a 0.5. The average might have been 0.4 or 0.3, where it becomes like the stretch goal to even see nutritional ketosis within 24 hours after having a dinner OMAD. So keep that in mind, especially if you're in a fat loss phase and you're using a lot of dinner OMADs. This makes a lot of sense why you might not be seeing the numbers on your Keto Mojo or some other device that you're hoping for.
Yep, and you might be experiencing that up and down volatility of the scale as well.
Yep,
so just to note here for the simple folks out there that want simplicity, the two shakes that were used, the shake for the low carb, high fat, moderate protein, that was Dr. Ben Bickman's health code, HLTH code, macadamia flavor shake.
Yeah.
Compared to the Carnation Breakfast Essentials shake.
Okay.
So know that there are options out there to simplify. If you're not a macro counter person or a calorie counter or a macro guy or gal, there are simple ways. I use the Fairlife protein shakes as well because there's 1 gram of sugar in them. Okay. So I use those strategically to end fast, to get more protein in, to break fast, to add to my coffee now. So there are ways that you can simply pull some really easy levers to make this fasting lifestyle more sustainable and to stick. So the main takeaway from today is time to fat burning, the fact that your pre-meal fast matters, and choose low carb, high fat, moderate protein as your last meal before fasting to enter ketosis more quickly, to stimulate less hunger, to prioritize fat burning and optimize your physiology. And this is a massive lever. And now we see it in the research of what we've seen time and time again in our own journeys and in all the folks that we've helped along the way. So Tommy, as we wrap up today, head to the show notes, grab a resource. You want a deep dive into a fasting lifestyle? Join a challenge. But today you have an action that you can pull, which is a simple intentional decision before your next fast. Try it out. See how it feels. Dare I say, eat a breakfast OMAD versus a dinner OMAD.
Ooh, I like it.
If you've been stuck, something needs to change, Tommy. I appreciate this conversation today, man.
Me too.
I expect this one to be to get a pretty cool response. And head to the show notes, grab a resource. We'll see you on the next episode, Tommy. Thanks for the conversation as always, man. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.